Hi, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show, the show for animal training and behaviour nerds, where I, Ryan Cartledge, interview the world's most proficient animal training and behaviour geeks. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever you're listening to this on so that you don't miss a single episode. Each episode of this show is brought to you on behalf of the ATA membership. And if you like the conversations in this episode, then you're invited to continue them with like-minded behaviour nerds within the membership area, which you can find out more about at www.animaltrainingacademy.com. You'll get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help problem solve your training challenges. Plus, we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forum areas. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behaviour geeks. Well, we will get started on today's episode where we'll be talking to one Shelly Wood. Shelley lives in Cape Girardeau, Mississauga, USA, where she shares her life with her dog Miha, a cat Wednesday, and a new puppy, Castor. Shelley has a Bachelor of Science degree in Social Work and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Spanish, and has worked in the non-profit sector with Early Prevention Impacts Community, also known as EPIC, for 10 years, working as both a project coordinator and project facilitator during that time. In 2013, Shelley worked with the EPIC project director to develop EPIC POWS, an animal-centered social and emotional learning program. Shelley also graduated from the Karen Pryor Academy Dog Trainer Professional Program in 2016 and is a Karen Pryor Academy Certified Training Partner. In 2017, Shelley started Drop Your Jaws dog training, where she works with people and the dogs they live with, teaching basic manner group classes and doing private consulting. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome one Shelly Wood to the ATA podcast show today. Thank you so much, Shelley, for coming and hanging out with us here, as you always do and have done for years at Animal Training Academy.
Thank you for asking me to come out and hang out today, Ryan. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, and I know the Academy members are going to be pumped to hear from you, and I'm excited as well to introduce your awesomeness to the greater Animal Training Academy audience. So let's dive in. Shelley, can you take us listening to this episode back and share with us where you first learned about positive reinforcement animal training and share some stories with us?
Sure. I know when we caught up before this episode to record, I did mention, Ryan, that I felt like I could get sidetracked on this question and maybe not even get to anything else. So hopefully I won't do that. But it took me a while to find animal training and positive reinforcement animal training in particular. And so there's kind of a lot of lead up to how I got started in positive reinforcement animal training. The short of it is a specific dog, a book, and an opportunity with my job all kind of converged at the same time to lead me to learn as much as I could about behavior change. But before that, there was a lot of stuff that kind of put me on a path to head me in this direction too, as well, I think. And I think like a lot of listeners probably, I've always just felt super connected to other animals. As a child, we always had cats and dogs. I remember one time we had ducks, one time we had cows, and that did not end well for me or the cows as a child when I started kind of making some connections in my head about what we had those three animals for. That began my first stint as a vegetarian, which was pretty brief at that point in time, but I'm back on that these days. And we also had horses when I was growing up. My family didn't believe in having animals inside. Obviously, we didn't keep the horses inside, but we didn't keep the dogs or the cats inside either. And we really didn't do any training with any of the animals except for the horses. And we raised some of our own horses, and I showed in little local shows and things like that with the horses. And sometimes we would train our horses ourselves, and sometimes we would send them to be trained. And in really trying to think about this over the past several days, I would say that all of the training, all of the intentional training we did with those animals was based in the use of aversives with the horses. I definitely loved the horses, and I would spend time with them and pet them and feed them sugar cubes and apples and various things, So from my end, I feel like I had a nice relationship with them to some level, but the intentional training that we did with them was all done with aversives. In my late 20s, I decided I wanted a puppy. I was kind of slow to settle down and do things that a lot of normal folks do, quote unquote, kind of normal folks do. And at that time, I had a full-time job and I had an apartment that was all on my own finally. And I decided that I also wanted a puppy because I had previously been in a relationship with a man who had a brindle pit bull named Jesus. And my relationship with that man was not terribly healthy, nor with many people in my life at that time. And Jesus and I really, really bonded. And I loved that dog a lot and lost touch with him when the relationship ended. But I always knew that I wanted a pit bull. And I remember my mom trying to talk me out of getting a pit bull because I lived above a bar downtown. There was live music there every weekend. It was an old shotgun apartment, and the stairs to go outside were just straight up and down. I didn't have any kind of a yard. She was like, "You're crazy. How are you going to keep a dog there?" But I did. I bought a little red-nosed pit bull named Lucy, and she lived with me for 16 years. I lost her in 2014, which is right about the time that I was really wandering into the positive reinforcement animal training community. Well, I took Lucy to some obedience classes. I really wanted to do right by her, so I took her to a little puppy class, and then we went to the next class after that as well. And that class was my first kind of introduction of using any type of positive reinforcement to change behavior. And that class was really a real kind of mixture. We used all kinds of strategies to change behavior in the class. Most of the dogs were in choke chains. We definitely relied on a lot of corrections and that sort of thing, but we also brought a ton of treats with us and worked to positively reinforce some behaviors. Lucy was super excited about the other dogs in class and really wanted to be near them. I was encouraged to correct her for trying to get nearer to them, and I didn't do a whole lot of that, maybe a little bit, but I guess I did in that I prevented her. I physically prevented her from going and getting near them and probably built a little bit of frustration in her. And she became a little bit reactive to other dogs on leash. And by reactive, I just mean, in her case, barking usually. But it was nothing that wasn't terribly manageable. And most of the things that I learned in class and then just kind of learned along the way having her, we were able to live quite comfortably and quite well together. A little bit later, I was married, and my husband and I adopted a dog named Chance, who sort of came with a whole lot of baggage. He was what I would call really reactive on leash and would lunge and bark and just kind of really escalate when he saw other dogs. So we did hire a trainer and kind of try to work with him a little bit with very limited success there. And then the dog who I mentioned earlier, who ended up really kind of helping set me on the path to positive reinforcement, animal training came into my life. I came home one day and my husband at the time said, I've got a project for you in the backyard. He can't stay here though. And the dog, unfortunately, and I hope I don't cry about this today as I talk about him a few times, but the dog stayed until last year when I lost him, unfortunately, due to a struggle with Cushing's disease. But the husband did not stay. I selected the dog. It wasn't really between the two of them, but that's just kind of the way that it went down. But not immediately either. But little Hank, a little probably Brindle boxer, maybe a little Staffy type mix, another little kind of pitty mix, was in my backyard with a broken leg that had been broken for so long it was atrophied and just sort of hanging there. He didn't have any use of it at all. And he was actually probably the easiest dog I have ever brought into my home. He never jumped on people, probably because he never learned to because of that broken back leg. And he was really easy to potty train. He was just a very good dog. And my husband and I took him and the other dog, Chance, to obedience classes. And after one night, we were like, yeah, no, Chance can't go back to that environment. Like, that's not gonna work, But Hank did really well in that environment. And shortly thereafter, though, he started barking a little bit when he would see other dogs. Nothing too extreme or anything, but just a little bit of barking when he was on leash and he would see other dogs. And so we reached out to another trainer, and she gave me the tools that she had in her toolkit at that time to try to help him, because I didn't want that for him. I didn't want it for us. I wanted his life to be nice and big and be able to take him lots of places and that sort of thing. So we started working with him using some of the things that she suggested, which included a prong collar, as well as using an air can with noise when he would bark at other dogs. And these things initially worked like magic. It stopped the barking immediately, so I was super reinforced for it. But shortly thereafter, the behaviors came back, and they came back a little bit stronger than they were before. So I pulled out those tools again, and we went through that cycle probably a couple of times until his reactivity was just really off the charts. It was really very difficult to deal with. And so somewhere around 2014, probably, somewhere in that time period, I specifically remember walking Hank and seeing somebody I know from the nonprofit world, a man walking his dog, and Hank was lunging, barking, trying to get to that other dog. And I was trying to just have a conversation with the man, and Hank turned around and bit me on my leg so hard. And I remember trying to pretend like that it just hadn't happened as I continued talking to the man, while I also was trying to glance down at my pants to see if he had ripped my jeans or if there was any blood or anything, which neither of those things had occurred. But so somewhere around that, and that was, Hank was just the sweetest, happiest little wiggly sort of dog. I mean, that was not his norm to behave like that, So very upsetting to me at that time. So somewhere around that, also somewhere in that time, I ditched the prong collar. I decided I just can't keep doing it. It's not working. Like, it's not helping the situation at all. I hadn't really made the connection, unfortunately, yet, that it was in fact probably hurting things. But whether that's the case or not, I definitely knew it wasn't helping anything anymore. So I ditched that, and I started mostly walking him at odd hours, trying to avoid other people and things like that. So I also started trying to, figure out other ways that I could possibly work with him. And also around that same time, and I'll hold this up and show you, Ryan, I know other people can't see it, and I just happened across it today. I wasn't even looking for it, but also around that time, a friend of mine gave me this book to read called Merle's Door. And at that time, I had kind of decided that it was better maybe not to train dogs. Maybe we shouldn't try to have so much like control over them, and we should just, quote unquote, let them be dogs sort of thing. And she thought I would really enjoy this book because the man who wrote it has a lot of that kind of philosophy himself. But in the book, he was dating a woman he lives somewhere out west where there's a lot of room, and his dog's able to have a whole lot of freedom. So that kind of works well for him. But he was dating a woman who lived in an urban urban area who it didn't work quite as well for. So maybe her dog, I can't remember if her dog actually needed any training or not, but at some point in the book, the man mentioned Karen Pryor. And he said, if you were going to train a dog, if anybody were going to spend time training a dog, they should check into Karen Pryor. And I believe he even used either one or both of the words choice and control. It was, a way to kind of empower animals, her methodology was. And so given all the trouble that I was having with Hank and this book, and I really liked the things that he kind of talked about there, I looked up Karen Pryor. And so also then found some other positive reinforcement trainers online, as many people have said on this show before, read Don't Shoot the Dog, and just really started climbing down the positive reinforcement behavior change rabbit hole. Also, at that same time, the nonprofit that I work for, EPIC, we are a youth substance abuse prevention coalition, and we were presented with an opportunity from a foundation in our state, which was looking for people to write concept papers to them, or actually just a letter at first, I think, about a project they would like to do, something they didn't have any money to do, something nobody was offering funding for, but something that could help them reach their mission if they did have the money to do it. And so my project director and good friend and myself were shooting around different ideas of things that we could ask for money for. And I should also point out that for my experience in the nonprofit world, that's a little unusual. Usually the grants tell you, we'll give you money if you do this, this, and this, and then you design your project to kind of get that funding, things like this happen sometimes. This special projects grant is what it was called, but they're kind of few and far between in my experience, where people are like, just tell us what you want to do and convince us and we'll give you the money, maybe. And so we were kicking around ideas, and I can't remember which one of us said it, but somebody said, well, it's too bad we can't do something like the Puppies for Parole program. And in Missouri, the Puppies for Parole program is a program where adults who are living in correctional facilities train dogs. They train rescue dogs, and then those dogs are adopted out. And so the other one, whichever one didn't say it, the other one said, well, why can't we do something like that? And so then we started talking about what it would look like if we were going to develop a program that was designed to try to prevent youth substance abuse, but to do it by working with rescue animals and dogs in particular. And so we wrote a little letter. The foundation liked what we had to say. They invited us to write a concept paper. We wrote a concept paper. They invited us to write a full proposal, and we were among the first grantees. They've done this now a few times, but this was the first time they had done it, and we were among the first grantees to get that special projects grant, which we were really proud of because it was definitely a competitive thing. So all of those things kind of happened at the same time. My issues with Hank just escalated, and I couldn't really, it just did not feel good. The way that I was trying to deal with those issues with him wasn't good for him, wasn't good for me. I was looking for different ways to try to help him. I read this book, Merle's Door. He referenced Karen Pryor, and then we got this funding to do this program with kids and dogs. And then I actually got to go to Clicker Expo to learn about how to work more with dogs before we started our program. So that's kind of what set me on this path.
So many things to talk about from what you just said there, and for the listeners of the show, I guess I should give some information first. Shelley's been an ATA member for a couple of years now, and I remember when you first joined, your introduction to our online communities was sharing the epic video, which maybe we can link on the show notes of this episode, because it's, for lack of a better word, pretty epic, the word you're doing with the kids there. And thank you for sharing about that book. And I know I had the pleasure of, I can't use the word knowing, of virtually knowing Hank over the years through your Animal Training Academy membership and sharing videos and seeking input and offerings from others about some challenges that you were having. So I just learned a lot about Hank. I didn't know he had a broken leg. I didn't know about that bite incident. And so thank you for bravely sharing all of that. Just curious before we move on, I know there's a question we have had frequently, I should say, over the years in our membership communities, and that is about getting programs started with troubled human learners, whether they be youth or not, and animals, most commonly dogs. Can you just share a little bit more about your work at EPIC and kind of what the program entails in 2020 or over the last few years?
Sure. So the program we developed, we call Epic Pals. So pals like buddies, pals. So Epic Pals. And the idea is that we will work to build social and emotional learning skills in kids. So things like compassion and empathy and dedication to service, the ability to set goals, the ability to kind of problem solve. So skills that are considered social emotional skills that can help them be more successful and more healthy in life and less likely to engage in risky behaviors like substance abuse. So it's actually really cool. I mean, it just is exactly what we're kind of trying to do with non-human animals that we're working with too, right? We're wanting to build the behaviors that we want to see in them to avoid those behaviors that are unhealthy for them or for the community to pop up. So with Epic Pals, we have a few different versions of it. The way that we originally designed it, kids would be paired with a dog and they would work with that dog for about 8 weeks as we tried to get the dog adopted. That program has changed so much since we first started it. Things were, I was not the first trainer for that program. The first trainer for that program quit before the program started. The next trainer for the program quit about a month before the first group ended. And then we worked with a young man who worked at our local shelter, and he did a really great job for us, but his schedule wouldn't allow him to accommodate the schedule that we were needed for the kids the next time. And so I kind of got thrown into the training piece of it. But in that version, the kids actively work to train the dogs, but we also go through lessons in a curriculum that are designed to build those skills that I was talking about by kind of connecting the dots for them between what we're doing with the training, what some of these animals are experiencing in their lives coming from the rescue community, that sort of thing, and then also subtly kind of connect the dots to how it's the same for people as well. And then we've adapted that program so that we also have a version where we just go into classrooms, because for the version I was just talking about, when we started it, we served groups of up to 6 kids at a time, I think. The first group was 5, after that, sometimes 6. And then we decided that 4 was really the optimal number, and that not only was 4 the optimal number, but we wanted an adult with each kid. So each kid kind of got an adult mentor along with the dog now, which they didn't get when we first started the program. So that one's kind of difficult to pull off because we don't have a rescue or a shelter here where we can actually do the program. So the dogs have to go in foster homes, have to be transported. We need a lot of volunteers. So we like that version. We try to maintain it. Like we do maintain it. The only time we haven't is now with COVID, of course. But we modified it so that we could grow into classrooms and serve larger groups as well. So in the modified version, I'll take one dog in with me, and it might not always be the same dog. It'll be a different dog sometimes, and we'll go through those social emotional lessons, and then I'll demonstrate some things with the dog, and maybe some of the kids will get to practice with that dog who is there. And we are currently looking at trying to develop a virtual option for Epic Pals because of COVID. So I feel like I got a little bit off track there, but hopefully that answers your question, Ryan.
Yeah, and it's really, from Ryan's personal opinion, offering a world-class program, in so much as I know that you've took content into that arena, like a Don't Shoot the Dog, and recently added PORTL into your program. So it's really cool to see what we're all doing at Clicker Expo being brought to these kids.
And I would also for sure, we have the kids read Don't Shoot the Dog a lot, and we have done some PORTL games with the kids, which is really fun. But I would also just add that one of our funders asked if we could do a little video of a child or a young adult who had gone through the Epic Pals program and quote unquote their dog. And so we just did one yesterday, just went and shot a little video with this gal just on the iPad, took this video. But the girl went through the program, I'm going to say it was like 3 years ago, probably. And my coworker actually owns the dog who she worked with in the program. So we were able to do a video with both her and the dog. But it was very cool talking to her and asking her, what did you learn? What did you remember? Can you demonstrate some of these things with Vito here? And it was just really nice hearing the things that she had to say and how much she remembered and got out of the program. And one thing that she said that I really wasn't expecting was I learned that training is a kind of about learning how to communicate with a dog and having a dog learn how to communicate with you. So I just thought that was really, really cool. It made me feel great yesterday when I chatted with her.
Sounds like some pretty amazing reinforcement for what you get paid to do. It's pretty lucky. Where can people who are interested in finding out more about Epic go online to do so? And also with Drop Your Jaws dog training, where can people find you online?
So Epic is Epic Prevention. So you can find the website at epicprevention.org. And we are on Facebook at facebook.com/epicprevention. And then my dog training business, Drop Your Jaws Dog Training, is on my website is dropyourjawsdogtraining.com. And it's facebook.com/dropyourjawsdogtraining. And I'm also on Instagram at Drop Your Jaws Dog Training.
Awesome. And we will, of course, link to all of this in the show notes as well. I'm additionally super excited to announce to everyone that Shelley is actually going to be the hostess with the mostest on a brand new podcast show that is being launched by us, Animal Training Academy. The show is going to be called Animal Training Academy Making Ripples, where Shelley will be having conversations with ATA premium members. The reason behind this new show is because of a desire to highlight the intense knowledge and skill set that ATA members have. I don't quite know how we have managed to do it, but somehow over the last 5 years, we have successfully attracted, in my personal opinion, some of the best subject matter experts from around the globe into our membership. Every time I step inside our, virtually of course, social distancing membership community areas, i.e. our members-only Facebook group and website forums, I learn a ton. It's a space full of creativity, curiosity, brave learning, and years upon years upon years of individuals whom have been shaping their craft and who now bring that knowledge and experience into the ATA membership community areas to help assist others. With all that being said, it's kind of silly actually that we have waited this long to shift the spotlight, so to speak, onto this community and facilitate its shining so that the ripples held within can flow into our wider positive reinforcement-based community. And I'm just absolutely thrilled to be able to announce its birth, for lack of a better word, on the show today, and even more so to let you all know that the wonderful guest today, Shelly Wood, is going to be the show's new host. So Shelley, firstly, thank you to you for continuously saying yes to my spontaneous ideas over the years and for taking on this new project with me. We're both very excited about this. I'm curious, Shelley, what makes you the most excited about getting this new podcast launched soon?
Okay. Well, first, let me say you're welcome, Ryan, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this new amazing podcast. And what makes me excited about it is all the stuff that you just said. There are some really, really amazing people in the ATA community, and I'm super excited to help spread those ripples out to the larger world. They have definitely, the knowledge and the skills that are shared or have been shared in the community since I've been a part of it have been a huge help to me. And I'm excited to share that with other people. There's so much amazing training that I see, whether it's in the ATA forums or in the ATA Facebook group from some people who I'm sure everybody who's listening to this podcast know, some really big names in the animal training community right now, but also from a lot of people who maybe I hadn't heard of before, but who are out there doing some really important work, some really skilled work, and who I'm excited to help get that work out there so more people can learn about it. Selfishly, I'm really excited about it because it is going to allow me to connect a little bit more on an individual level with some of these folks, get to know them a little bit better, and dig a little bit deeper into some of the cool things that they're doing, and then share that information with you all as well. So I don't know if you wanted me to kind of talk about who some of the first guests were going to be, Ryan. Okay, so I'm really excited. I'm going to record with Joe Locke in the morning, a podcast episode. And Joe Locke she has a business, Knows No Limit, where she does conservation scent work with her dog, Willow, and she does a lot of other really great stuff as well. I was actually supposed to stay in an Airbnb with Joe and a group of folks at Clicker Expo this year when it unfortunately, of course, had to be canceled. So I'm super excited for this opportunity to catch up with her and dig a little bit deeper and learn about some of the really wonderful things that she is doing. And then I hope to record an episode soon. We're going to catch up tomorrow to just chat a little bit about what that episode is going to look like, but with Kiki Yablon of Dog Training by Kiki Yablon, who I'm sure some of the listeners who are listening here at least are familiar with her name from her dog training business, which is amazing, which she shares wonderful content online, and her blog is great, as well as lots of videos that she shares. But she's also a TA in Dr. Susan Friedman's Living and Learning with Animals course. So super excited to get to chat with her a little bit as well.
Awesome. And I, like you, am excited to share the names of these members of ours who I'd feel just have a different expenditure of time than creating online content, and their awesomeness is therefore concealed to their local geographical area. But we're excited to spread those ripples around the world. And also I think it's totally fine to be selfish in your podcasting endeavors. I feel like this show is just about Ryan Cartledge getting to hang out with cool people all the time, and I just get to share it with everyone. So thanks for sharing that. And so today is the 17th of August in New Zealand, and we're going to release this 2 weeks-ish after this recording, and then fingers crossed, no pressure on you, Shelley. We hope to get the podcast launched in September or early October. So we'll keep you updated on that. Hey, we appreciate you sharing everything you've shared so far, Shelley. We call that part of the show, hearing about people's behavioural odysseys. So we appreciate that, especially some of the brave sharing you did about some canines who are no longer with us, but I'm glad we got to talk about them today. Moving forward, though, I'd really like to talk about something that you've got quite a lot of experience with now, and something that with some recent conversations happening within the ATA community areas as of late, there was a realization by me of a potential gap in our content library about animal introductions. So we're going to talk about this now, and Shelley, please feel free to jump back and forth in your story here with the different animals and between different times in your journey learning about doing this. But specifically, there's been a lot going on in the Wood household lately, specifically in the last couple of months with both Castor, your current puppy, and oh my God, he is ridiculously cute, and then another recent foster you took on, Cross. And part of the appreciation I can offer the listeners of this show, and you can hear me offering it to Shelley now, is the appreciation from your recent endeavours comes from you being such a brave learner. I've mentioned that a couple of times already today, but when I say that, part of what that operationally looks like is you sharing so much of your journey online in the ATA members-only community areas and via your personal social media as well. And specifically with regards to the ATA community areas, really leveraging that knowledge base we talked about earlier. And it's been so much fun to just be a lurker sometimes and just follow along the conversations and watch all the training videos you update. So let's get going on this conversation, Shelley. You have framed your posts in our community areas as Shelley has lost her mind and Shelley has lost her mind part 2. Can you walk us through what that looks like? What have you implemented with Cross, Castor, Miha, and Wednesday. And what have you learned over the last 2 months?
Okay, good. I'm glad you were specific about what you wanted me to walk you through. I'm like, you want me to walk you through what it's like when Shelley loses her mind? But okay, specifically about these animals. Great. Well, yeah. So I've known for quite a while now that I wanted to foster, although I think that experience is probably going to be short-lived since I've now adopted a puppy, which I had not planned on doing. But when I had Hank, it was not possible to foster. He and Miha had some dog-to-dog challenges, which you know about, Ryan. You've helped me with, and I use the ATA forums to talk about as well. But it just wouldn't have made sense to add another animal into the mix. And so I kept thinking I would foster, and then finally, about a month or so ago, actually a woman who was an instructor at that first obedience school that I talked about now runs a rescue, and she had posted online that she had hurt her wrist. She was having some sort of surgery, and she really needed help getting some of the rowdier, larger dogs out of there. And so I agreed to, or I reached out to her and said, hey, I can foster a dog for you. Here's kind of what the animals in my house look like. Here's kind of who the type of animal I think might be a good fit or not. And she didn't have anybody on site, but she was supposed to be taking an owner surrender 8-month-old lab mix in. And I said, I'll go get him and I'll take him. And so I brought Cross into my house. And before I brought him into my house, Ryan, anybody, I think you probably say it on this podcast. I know I hear you talk about it a lot, jumping into the deep end of the pool. And I know that you and I have joked about like jumping into the deep end of the pool and just kind of splashing around in there. But honestly, that's usually not quite what happens. There is a bit of splashing around, I think, that happens, but like in the case of bringing this foster dog into my house, like really I've had some swimming lessons over the past several years. You know, I've been doing every continuing education thing I can afford or have the time to do, you know, so I have some behavior change knowledge. I have a little bit of behavior change experience as well, you know, and the Animal Training Academy community is full of lifeguards. They may not always be on duty, but there are lots of lifeguards there. And there are also lots of little floaties and lifesavers and things floating around in the pool in the form of all of the content that's already there, you know. So knowing I have all of those things allows me to kind of jump into the deep end of the pool. And sometimes I might splash around a little bit and sometimes maybe a whole lot. But usually there's some resource there in my world to grab onto to help me. Something else that really helped me with Cross and introducing him into my house was my friends who were more than willing to come and do parallel walking with he and my dog Miha to help try to set up appropriate introductions with them. And so my friends, the Animal Training Academy community, the education that I've gotten all kind of help me not just completely splash around in the deep end of the pool. And so I think your question, I'm sorry, I'm totally off track again, but I think your question was, what have I kind of learned about the animals and myself through these experiences?
Yeah, and also the processes, techniques that you have found helpful. You mentioned parallel walking there, and I know I won't name them yet, but I know there's some other really exciting and new for you as well, strategies that you've been implementing and guided by some of those lifeguards, which I love that metaphor, by the way, in the community. So maybe unpack some of that for us would be really cool, I think.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you for getting me back on track there a little bit. Yeah, so with Cross, I really worked at trying to set the environment up well. You know, like I said, I had some friends help me out with some parallel walking and things. I also told one of my friends, as long as he doesn't just like bark nonstop, and as long as nobody wants to kill each other, I think I can handle any of it, you know. And I got him home and he barked nonstop, and I couldn't think like for a day probably. And then I took Miha for a ride in the car, and when it was quiet and I could think, I was like, I have a pet tutor and I filled it up with food before he came because I knew that this could help me in this situation. And so I was able to use the pet tutor and feed Cross in situations when he would normally bark and prevent that barking from even occurring and start building some kind of calm behavior in him, which was wonderful. And then I started doing some work with he and Miha in the presence of each other and trying to use some of Leslie McDevitt's pattern games. I was initially just kind of feeding them for seeing the other one. But then I think Leslie actually commented on the Facebook post, or somebody commented on, I think she is the one that started the commenting on it, but talked about her voluntary sharing protocol, where one animal uses, and I hope I don't mess this up too bad, but where one animal uses a start button behavior for you to to mark and then feed the animal and then feed the first animal. And so she calls that voluntary sharing. And I started doing that with Cross and Miha. Miha would offer me eye contact, which is a very likely behavior for Miha to offer me. It's been reinforced a lot. She would offer me eye contact. I would mark that eye contact. I would feed Cross and then I would feed Miha. And then also using from Leslie's Control Unleashed from Reactive to Relaxed book, also using her 1, 2, 3 pattern game, which I actually do use quite a bit, but had never used in this kind of situation. So that was really helpful as well. In that pattern game, you just basically, there are a couple of versions of it, but basically, you just walk and count 1, 2, 3, and then hand the dog a treat in the most basic version of it. So it was great to have her input in the community. I know Sarah Owings had some wonderful input in the community as well, based on when she brought her dog Tucker into the house. Gabriella, I don't want to say her last name because I'm not sure how to, but one of the ATA members, Gabriella, has a lot of experience, it sounds like, fostering dogs and introducing dogs. And so she was willing to share a lot of that with me as well. And then J.R. Henderson, Animal Training Academy member, was really helpful in giving me some tips on introducing, and continues to be with Castor now as well, but on introducing my cat, Wednesday, to these strange new dogs who I keep bringing home. So does that start to answer your question a little bit there, Ryan?
Yeah, maybe talk us through your parallel walking process as well for those who haven't heard of that before.
Sure, good idea. And I don't know when I say parallel walking if it means the same thing that it means when other people say parallel walking. So the way that I introduced Cross to Miha was, and I've done this with my friend got a new youngish, new kind of adolescent puppy a few months back, and I've done it with that dog and with at least one other dog with Miha as well. But the way that I have done it is I have a trusted friend, somebody who Miha knows and likes, with the dog that she has not met yet. And then that trusted friend is a distance away. Miha may or may not know that's who it is quite yet. And then the person comes a little closer. I mark and reinforce for eye contact from Miha, for calm, attentive behavior from her. At some point she figures out, oh, hey, that's my human friend who I love, and she's got this dog attached to the end of a leash. And then my friend comes closer and we just walk the dogs next to each other, but not close enough to each other that they can physically interact. And this particular friend and I, she has a dog, Bats, who Miha and I walk with all the time. And so Miha's very used to, we go on walks with this woman with another dog. And so we just then kind of make it one of those walks, if that makes sense, while feeding the dogs for the behaviors that we want to see and keeping an eye on body language to make sure we don't need to create any more distance or to decide when it's okay to reduce distance. And then over, several walks, I tend to, I don't know if this is the best thing to do or not, but what I usually do is over several walks, just sort of let the dogs organically begin wandering closer together and maybe sniffing some of the same things at the same time. Try to walk in enriched areas where there are lots of things that they might be interested in besides just being fixated on each other, and become kind of walking buddies in that way. So that's what I mean by it.
And JR, the super member, I just got a notification on my computer that he's uploaded a new video called Druga and Voluntary Brushing. If you don't know JR Henderson, Zen Cats Rock is his his business name. Definitely worth Googling if you are interested or have behavioural challenges. Or just want to learn more about cat training. And Gabriella, I'm gonna have an attempt. I've never said it before, so I'm sorry, Gabriella B, if I get this wrong. Gabriella Boyson. You mentioned the pet tutor there, Wes Anderson, the creator of the pet tutor, Leslie McDevitt. Much gratitude to Leslie if you're listening to this for the amazing time and energy you put into the ATA community areas and helping people like Shelley out. And of course, Sarah Owings, I believe you implemented some stuff from Hannah Brannigan's book. Is that correct? Did I see that recently with Castor?
Yeah, so I did not intend to get a puppy. I thought maybe I would foster a dog again. And then Castor luckily found a wonderful, just the best possible home. And shortly thereafter, the woman where I had adopted or where I had fostered him from had the cutest little puppy available for adoption. And I don't know how, but I ended up adopting him and bringing him home. And so now I'm just kind of in like crash course trying to figure out all the things that I need to do at this very critical time in this puppy's life because he is 10 weeks old. And so I'm looking for content online to help with that. And Hannah Brannigan recently did a podcast with Debbie Martin, a co-creator, I believe, of Puppy Start Right. And in that podcast, they had all kinds of great ideas of ways to socialize your puppy during a pandemic. And one thing they talked about was teaching a dog to kind of stand for exam, for handling, for vet care, that sort of thing, and using like maybe a metal spoon to simulate what a stethoscope or something might feel like touching the dog. So I've been working with little Castor on that just a little bit.
I believe Castor was Shelley's Lost in Mind Part 2.
Yes.
in the Facebook community. Couple of questions. Firstly, you talked about splashing around and having lifeguards and not being able to think. As an observer of what you've been doing and your posts, I'm impressed by your brave learning and sharing, because I feel every time we share, we are doing so from a place of vulnerability because we open ourselves up for criticism. And I know social media, I've had many conversations, is not always the easiest place to do that for a lot of people. But then I've been observing you doing it, getting feedback, and then like I go away to grab a cup of coffee, and I come back and there's like 3 videos of you like already implemented. So from where I'm sitting, it seems like you've got that something that I feel like I try to facilitate an animal training academy is planning, implementing, reviewing, and back to planning. What is your process? How did you one of those moments where I wish you could see the guest's face. How did you manage all of that? How did you kind of have this dog deal with making yourself vulnerable, process the feedback, implement it, and then go again? Like how did you work through that?
That's a really good question because it hasn't up until this point necessarily been my norm. I can be really sensitive / reluctant on what I'm going to share because I'm worried about what kind of feedback I might get. I want things to look perfect before I share them. In my house currently, I ripped up all the floors over the past 6 months. And so the house doesn't even look good, much less being worried about the training, So it's not something that I have done a whole lot of in the past. I've done some, but not a whole lot. I'm real cautious and careful with what I do share online usually, even though the community is super supportive and a great safe place to share things. I'm still just usually a little sensitive and hesitant to do so. So I think it goes back to exactly what you just mentioned again, that jumping into the deep end of the pool, which I did jump into the deep end of the pool. And so I needed help and I needed to access resources and people who could help me. And I think it just made me really open to feedback as well, acknowledging that I've got some plans in place and some ideas about how all of this is going to work, but I definitely am open to guidance because this is really important. It's important for my life. It's important for the animals who I am in charge of taking care of regularly, and in the case of Cross, this animal who I have said I will take care of temporarily. And now in the case of Castor, this animal who I am planning to take care of regularly, so it's just a really important thing to me, which I think made it a little bit easier to be more vulnerable and to instantly accept feedback and work through it. And in the case of introducing animals in your home, it's a 24/7 kind of thing. So if, like with Cross, with him barking, I had to figure out how to get him to do something besides bark if I wanted any of us to live peacefully in my home, So I think all of those things made it a little bit easier.
Well, so we could name, I'm going to make a list, 5 things you could do or 5 things to consider if you're wanting to introduce canines or other animals in your house to each other. We could use remote feeders. We could use Leslie McDevin's pattern games. I'm a big fan of pattern games for all species, not just canines. We could listen to some of our peers and mentors, and you mentioned Hannah Brannigan and who was the guest? And Debbie Martin, their podcast episode together. I know we mentioned parallel walking, and I know another thing that I want you to just quickly mention for the listeners of this show after I stop talking is antecedent arrangement and kind of how you set your house up before the animals even arrived. The other one, though, is I think that I'm getting and taking away from your story is surrounding yourself by those lifeguards and your village. And one thing that I feel I could confidently say from your experience doing this and placing yourself in that vulnerable position is that it was reinforcing for you. And I feel like I can say that because the frequency of your posting has been maintained as or increased. So I'm curious to know, and I don't know if you've thought about this before, but what would you say the reinforcement for you has been? So you've acknowledged that you've had to be brave. You've done it, and the behaviours maintained and or increased. So you're obviously reinforced. What have you found has been the most reinforcing part of that process for you? And how important has it been for the overall success of what I'm going to label as success of Castor and Cross?
Yeah, really good question. And I think that what has been most reinforcing has been what looks like success. I think that what has been most reinforcing is seeing the animals get calmer together over days together, and seeing what I would label progress, but in the animals as individuals and then in them together, and knowing that progress is as a result of implementing feedback, as a result of using knowledge and information and resources that I have available to me and also implementing feedback. And I would also just want to kind of give another shout out to a name that everybody who's listening to this I'm sure knows, but Ken Ramirez and his article, Tulip and Marlin, when he introduced Tulip and Marlin, I don't remember what the name of the article is. It's online somewhere on the Karen Pryor clicker training, I think, website in a blog post he did. And it's also in his book, The Eye of the Trainer. Even before I started reaching out in the community for help, as I was thinking about bringing a dog into the home, I was thinking, I had that article very much in the forefront of my mind and relied very heavily on a lot of the things that he talked about in there as far as safety. And then also with just real quick, I'm sorry, I know I probably talked too long, but I'd like to give another shout out to Mike Shikashio, who I have learned a ton from about good handling skills and safety, and knowing those things just having that knowledge is also, I think, reinforcing and makes it easier to set those antecedent arrangements that you were talking about. So I kind of went back to the antecedent arrangement thing, but as far as what's reinforcing about the sharing for me, I think it's seeing progress in the behavior, seeing the behavior head in the direction where I want it to go.
Lovely. I love that answer. You mentioned Ken Ramirez, Michael Shikashio. We've talked about Hannah Brannigan, Sarah Owings, Leslie McDevitt. All people that I would label as artful, I hate that word, skillful, knowledgeable, lots of practical experience and reinforcement history at using the science of behaviour to work with their learners, their earthling learners, including humans. And part of that, part of that skill set, my opinion is making it safe for your human learners to be human learners. And we talk. I just want to make sure that this part of this conversation is acknowledged, because I think the message we're putting out there is to make sure that you surround yourself by your village when you're doing any learning, and the reinforcer being, if you do that, your behaviour with your learners will move in the direction you want. But how important is choosing your coaches and your lifeguards and seeking out that safe space? Should we just go and post in any group on social media?
You're asking me that? Oh my gosh, no. I don't think so. I think it's very important to know what kind of training your lifeguards have, what kind of licensing and such that they have, and to really, really select the folks that you are open to receiving feedback from. I also think it's important to say when you want feedback, and if you don't want feedback, even if you don't say, or if you don't want feedback, I think it's important to probably say, I don't really want feedback on this, because even if you just put something out there you don't want feedback on and you don't ask for it, you may get it, But I think it's really critical to choose those lifeguards and the pool you're going to be swimming in wisely.
Nice. I feel like I'm going to use this metaphor for forever. And so can you just return to what you're talking about before with regards to before Cross got there, before Castor got there, what did your house look like? What changes did you make to the environment? How did you set up the antecedents for bringing those animals into your house in the first place?
Okay, so although my house looks like a wreck, as I mentioned earlier, because of me ripping up all of the floors, that actually kind of put me in a really good place to bring some random dogs into my house, because the room that I normally use as my bedroom on the first floor is completely empty. And so I brought a big kennel in to put in that room. I also put a lot of enrichment items around the room itself. And then there's a door to that bedroom that I put a barrier in front of, and then there's a little hallway where I also put a baby gate to use as a barrier in front of that. And then there's a dining room area, and on the other side of that is a living room, and I put another baby gate there so that the dogs could be completely visually separated from each other if I needed them to be. And then so I also had a way to kind of approximate them a little bit closer together over time. Another antecedent arrangement that I had forgotten I made was filling the pet tutor. So those are some of the biggies. Having spray shield around. Miha has had some challenges with some other dogs. She is what some people might label, or can be what some people might label, dog selective. And so just to be uber safe, I wanted everybody as separate as possible, and had spray shield around just in case somebody would break through the barriers and something terrible would happen and I would need to break up, struggle between the dogs or something. So those are the main antecedent arrangements that I can think of.
Awesome. So there's been a lot of different information in here, and hopefully if you're interested in doing what Shelley's been doing, and obviously animal introductions don't just happen in our homes, they happen at shelters, they happen in places where exotic animals are kept, so we might be doing it with lions or tigers. And I know some of the feedback in some of the animal introduction posts have been from people who have been working with animals and species like large cats. So obviously very different considerations, but additionally a lot of the same considerations can be kind of generalized to your specific situations. I've got two more questions before we start to wrap up today, Shelley. So this is 2 questions in one, so I've got 3 more questions. First question, so I'm going to include 2 questions here. Like I said, first part of it is, what would you do differently next time if you were to do something different? And from across Miha and Castor, what were some of your favourite moments of doing these introductions?
What I would do different is I would have the pet tutor in the room so that I would not forget that I had it. I would have it placed where I wanted to use it. That's definitely one, that's the first thing that pops into my mind as something that I would do different. I'm sure there are lots of other things that I could do differently too, but that's definitely the first thing. Anything like that I wanted or needed to use to have it front and center. Some of my favorite moments with both Cross and with Castor, I approximated to some actual play sessions, and some of those play sessions have been some of my favorite moments. With both of them, I still had some layers of safety in place. I kept harnesses on the dogs. Initially, one of them would have a leash, or a leash would be dragging, that sort of thing. But watching them play and seemingly enjoy each other was one of my favorite things. And probably my favorite thing with Cross is the family that he got. They are just amazing. In fact, I shared with a woman, she shared something on Instagram, and I commented on it that sometimes the universe just works exactly the way that it's supposed to. And I think this was one of those times. Cross's life expanded when he came to my home, which was great. He had his people who had him before were doing the absolute best they could with him. They had never had a dog before. They had kind of a small place. They worked a lot. So when he came to my home, his life expanded a little bit. And then he went to go live as an indoor dog, but on a farm where he gets to ride the gator and go run around through a river and do all kinds of wonderful things all the time. And he's just thriving there, which is one of my favorite things for sure.
Well, you actually answered my next question, which was what happened to Cross. There we are. Hey, thank you so much for all of that, Shelley. We are now, sadly, at the final question for this episode. And for this part of the show, we started off with your past, we've talked about your present, and now we'd like to travel into the future. Can you share with the listeners of this show, please, what you would really like to see happen over the next 5 to 10 years in the animal training world?
I would just love it if reaching for the least intrusive method was just the norm, It took me until 2014 to kind of stumble across this way of training. And I know that it's growing in popularity, that people are beginning to employ a lot more positive reinforcement-based techniques and use more least intrusive. That's not a good sentence, but I think you know what I mean. And I would like to see that be the first thing we reach for, whether we're doing work like I'm doing with EPIC, or whether we're people who are working in the criminal justice system, or whether it's people who are training dogs, cats, birds, whatever. I would like to see us reach for those least intrusive methods first.
Well, to borrow from Susan Freeman, we like to celebrate approximations. So let's celebrate the approximation of this episode. In moving the needle, no matter how small or insignificant that move might be, let's celebrate that. So thank you very much, Shelley, for everything today. Before we do officially wrap up, I know we mentioned this towards the start of the episode, but could you please just remind everyone listening where they can go to find out more about you, what you do, and get in touch?
Sure. To find out about the work that I do with Epic Pals for the nonprofit Epic, you can just search for Epic Prevention. Our website is epicprevention.org. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/epicprevention. My email is pals@epicprevention.org. And then for my dog training business, Drop Your Jaws Dog Training is dropyourjawsdogtraining.com. And it's facebook.com/dropyourjawsdogtraining and at dropyourjawsdogtraining on Instagram.
Wonderful. And as mentioned, we will, of course, link to all of this in the show notes as well. Shelley, this has been so much fun from me, and on behalf of everyone listening, we really appreciate you and you taking the time to come on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
We do, of course, really appreciate all of you tuning in today as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you were interested in carrying on the conversation about working with our animals in the most positive, funnest, choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. That's it for this episode though. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks again so much everyone for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.